Welcome to the Battle Ready Podcast with Aaron McManus and Erwin McManus. Hi, Dad. How you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I want to get some of the things out of the way real quick. Thank you, everyone who's been watching, who's been commenting, who's been emailing, who's been reviewing. We're so grateful. We are so grateful. And this is a reminder, if you watch on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, let us know that you're watching on Instagram at Battle Ready Podcast. Hit follow, comment. We post clips. A lot of them are just kind of funny moments that I like to post. I like to laugh. But rate and review this on iTunes if you have the chance. We're so grateful. So grateful when you do that. We've actually gotten 100 reviews. And since we started
That's amazing.
doing this every week, which is really cool. So I think we're up to like almost 400 now. And I read those. And we also have an email, Aaron@battlereadypodcast.com. Send us topic suggestions. You can give us feedback. Let us know how you're doing. But it's just another way for us to stay connected. And we have some Battle Ready merch this week. This hat is, you going to put this on? We have this hat and we're going to throw some.
I love the Battle Ready hat.
Come on. Battle Ready hat. You can wear it while we face every battle every day.
Because everyone faces daily battles.
We have battles every day.
It's so good. I'm so excited. Today we're going to talk about permission to disagree.
Oof.
We're in a culture where people seem to polarize each other, demonize each other, vilify each other just because they have a different view, a different position. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to jump into some politics. We're going to jump into some cultural issues, COVID issues. We're going to talk about those things that seem to divide us and how to disagree with people while still being agreeable with people.
Sounds good. Can't wait to jump into it.
All right, here we go.
Today was an interesting day because you gave us a great topic to talk about, but we just did the Minimalist podcast.
It was so great to be there with Joshua. He's such a great guy.
It was so great. And I didn't even catch his name because I was so nervous the whole time. But it was a unique experience. They film and record right across the street from where we record. And you've done the podcast before, and you're in their Netflix special.
Their next documentary, I'm a part of it.
Yeah, I think it's releasing this Christmas.
Either Christmas or January, yeah.
Kind of cool. So we did that, and it was a longer process than I thought. I was really nervous.
But it was so cool to have the Minimalists send out an email to us saying, we love the Battle Ready podcast. Could we have you and Aaron on to advertise your podcast?
It was really cool. So, I've always been like a last minute studier.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's last minute learner.
Yeah. So I'm in the shower and I'm like, phone is up on the shower thing and I'm blasting the Minimalist because I've never heard it and I hadn't seen the special. But obviously like I've heard of them and
Sure.
And you have such a great relationship with them. It was really cool to actually get to be on a podcast. And I felt wildly intimidated. I don't know if he would look at me like it's your turn to talk and I'd go, yep. And I'd toss it back over to you.
Well, they're great guys, and I have seen the documentary. It's really good.
But one thing that we did bring up, so if you haven't checked out The Minimalist, they're awesome. Listen to their podcast, hit subscribe.
Or go to Netflix and watch the documentary.
Watch the documentary. That's the first part, and the second part's coming out December, which is kind of cool. Basically, they talk about having a minimalist lifestyle, whatever faith background, whatever belief background, just kind of this idea that we don't need more stuff.
Yeah.
But there's obviously things that we need in life.
Yeah, I love their little phrase, love people, use things.
Love people, use things?
Rather than use people, love things.
Oh, I didn't catch that. I was blacked out the whole time. I was just, you walk into a room and you're just so not ready for it. I wasn't ready, but battle ready. I wasn't ready.
You were not battle ready.
No, but
you were in a minimal condition.
We talk a lot about controlling environments, and I was telling you yesterday, I was like, I get really nervous when I'm in a new environment because, well, I think growing up with like a lack of social skills, I was kind of nerdy. I wasn't like the cool kid. When you walk into a room, there were so many variables. Like, who am I going to talk to? What am I going to talk about? Like, I don't know if I'm naturally interesting, but I feel always more comfortable with the nerds because I am a nerd inside. And now it's funny now because nerds are the best people to talk about sports, talk about anything about, because they know the facts, the details, all this stuff. Anyways, you brought this up and we talked about this with the minimalists. We need to all have the permission to disagree.
Yeah, we have a theme for today, it's permission to disagree. I think we're in the middle of a time where you're not allowed to have an opposing position. It's a really dangerous time because it's actually not expanding our ability to think. It's actually minimalizing it, and you see this on the political level. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, it's amazing to me how right now, if you're a Democrat, it feels almost unethical and immoral if you're a Republican.
Hmm.
And if you're a Republican, it feels unethical and immoral to be a Democrat.
Hmm.
And it's odd to me that people can be neighbors. They can be actually very similar, and yet the political divide turns them into enemies. And one of the reasons this was highlighted to me, and I guess this is full disclosure, and who knows, maybe I'm going to create some controversy or someone's going to.
You definitely did on that podcast, which was
the potential of being canceled. But
yes.
One of my friends and his wife went to the RNC at the White House.
Yes. So if you're a Democrat or a liberal and you're listening to this, don't turn it off.
Hang with me.
Hang in there.
I was surprised they were there, but when I saw him post a photograph, but because they're my friends, I liked the photograph and I was listening to what he said, and it didn't even occur to me that, one, I forget that everyone sees your likes, and that now you're cancelable if you like the wrong person's statement or something like that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I started getting all these DMs of people going, can you please explain to me how you could like that photograph? Can you please explain to me how you could like someone going to the Trump rally? Can you please explain to me how you could, like a photograph of
people
the
you
RNC?
don't know and people you do know?
I don't know
both?
these people.
No,
most people I don't know.
But I want to talk about that too, about like how much access do you let strangers, how much access do you give to strangers, and proximity do you give to people that necessarily aren't in your world?
Yeah, I used to give
And
almost
power over
complete
your
access to every stranger in the world until I found it was really bad for my mental health.
Okay.
But frankly, I didn't even think that much about the like, because it's my Instagram, those are my friends, and I thought, wow, what an interesting thing that they're at that event. But then it immediately puts me in the minds of people on the right. And suddenly everything I've ever said and everything I've ever done is now seen through the filter of that one like. And which is at the same time, and I wasn't public about this, but I've been sending texts to someone in the Biden campaign and having conversations with them about, hey, here's some things in your messaging that, that if you could actually adjust and think through would make the message more accessible to a broader audience. And here are things that are going to hurt your campaign. Here are things that I think are actually going to be detrimental. And so I'm clearly not a person who's trying to reelect President Trump, but I'm not a person who's trying to elect Joe Biden. I'm a person who's trying to speak to both sides to make them both more humane, more reasonable, more thoughtful, and more inclusive. And I think that's a part of my role in life. But if you aren't willing to make an enemy of one side, you're not then seen as loyal to your side.
And that's this conversation that we actually, I'm going to bring some of this minimalist conversation, and we're not going to repeat all of it, but I thought there were some cool themes that we talked about. We talked for 2 hours.
Absolutely.
So
right.
Who knows what we'll make it in there. We talked about tribes versus communities.
Right.
And, who we align with versus, based on beliefs or value systems. And not everyone believes the same things, but we kind of will have these value systems that will be similar. And when you're in a tribe, it seems like you are only allowed to believe the things that the tribe believes. Do you agree with that?
No, that is where society has gone.
Right.
And so
versus can we give a versus communities
where people are different than you, but you come together by common values. You want to make the world better. You believe in compassion. You believe in a humane society.
Right.
And so even though you may come at it in different ways.
So from a faith background, do churches oftentimes are tribes when they should be communities?
Absolutely. So
right.
a lot, and it's one of the first questions I asked the representatives from the Biden campaign is, who do you have in the room? It seems like your room is filled with people who all see the world exactly the same way. You have no dissenting voices. You have no different perspectives, and you need to get a broader room so you can understand the people who are going to vote differently than what you hope. And to me, I feel the same way with the Republicans, if they asked me, I would say, who do you have in the room? Is everyone in the room, they've already passed a litmus test of a common belief system. You can't think at a higher level if everyone in the room agrees with you. And I'm trying to teach people to have permission to disagree and to have people who disagree in the same room. And that's what people don't understand about Mosaic. I never started Mosaic so that we would have a monolithic community where everyone was the same, where everyone believed the same, where everyone lived the same. I wanted to create a place where everyone was given an opportunity to actualize the best version of themselves. And
which is why I think a lot of people hold Mosaic so dear to their heart.
yes.
And we were talking about this, or maybe I was talking about this. Like, I have a friend who introduced me to one of his friends, and I think she was wearing a cross as a necklace, and he was like, "Wait, you believe in God?" She's like, "Yeah, like I would love to meet more people in LA that believe in God." And he's like, "You have to go to Mosaic." Given this is her, she's telling me this. I haven't talked to him about it, but she was like, "Yeah." I was telling him, like, I already have a church. I go to a great church. And he's like, no, it's not Mosaic.
But this guy doesn't even believe in God.
He doesn't, I don't think he
Mosaic.
does. No, but he's been to Mosaic, and like him and his girlfriend at the time had come, and they believe differently than us, but they're so supportive of what we build, and they know that it's like a really good thing.
And they're trying to make a better world.
And they're trying to make, and that was like the common denominator. They're like, this is a good thing, and we need, and even if I don't believe it, we need to support it because we supported them and their brand and their whole like world. And so I think they saw that kind of that mutual love, but that's the difference. I think of a community. I'm like, man, you rep Mosaic harder than I do sometimes.
Yeah, but I think
kind of cool.
This dilemma is true not just in politics. It's even true with things like COVID.
Right.
I mean, I have really intelligent, educated friends who are extreme liberals. I have really educated, intelligent friends who are extreme conservatives.
We have people in our family who are super liberal, people in our family who are super conservative.
In the same household.
In the same household.
Yes.
The dinner table is volatile. It's a dangerous place.
Right. But what's amazing to me is that they're both prone toward conspiracy theories on their end of the table. And I listen and I try to be open-minded and I try to, be thoughtful. But there have been a few times where one of them, who's extremely to the right, said something really I felt was inappropriate. And I just said, hey, you can't do that. That's just wrong. And
what
then
they do, you can't be that vague. Come on.
Oh,
this is we had to unpack these things.
They said something negative about the Obamas. That was more personal than it was political.
Don't mess with Michelle Obama.
And to me, it's like, hey,
I have so much respect for that family.
You can attack policy, and I'm good with you, but the moment you start attacking a person, and I don't like the way people go, well, I don't know this. I just read this. Well, this is just how I'm going. Well, if you don't know it, and it's a negative, if it's slander, if it's malicious, don't spread it.
Yes, but we live in a culture now where I read it somewhere. It's like a congratulatory moment where like, oh, congrats, you read something. It doesn't mean it's factual.
Right.
People are like science and the numbers. It's like, okay, a scientist or a doctor somewhere put that out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what is someone with an opposing belief all say?
Right.
Like me and you, like what I love about like our house, mm-hmm. even like when we watch the news as a family, we don't often do that, but like, we'll throw it on the background, we're cooking or grilling or doing whatever. We're always going back and forth between multiple different news channels. We're never just like, I think you're on the right, you're like, Fox News is my guy. You're on the CNN, if you're on the left, you're going, CNN is
or MSNBC.
MSNBC. And I'm going like, there's no real true middle, like, do you remember that the show, The Newsroom?
Yeah, which I loved.
Like who's the main actor in The Newsroom?
Daniels?
Jeffrey Daniels?
Jeff
Daniels?
Yeah.
Jeff Daniels.
Yeah.
Where his opening, like the whole concept of the show, it was on HBO, is like talking about doing the news like truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
With no agenda, giving the hard facts, and sometimes it's going to be boring, and sometimes it's going to be really hard. But he has that opening monologue, and we've talked about it before, where he talks about like, when he's asked, is America the greatest country in the world? And he goes, no, but it used to be,
mm-hmm.
but it could be again. And it was like kind of this this thing of like, we've lost this ability to disagree with each other.
Right. And so what we do though is we demonize. And I would say is that if you're listening right now, you're going, well, that's not me. If you're prone toward demonizing a person from the other side, it is you.
And explain that. Like, what would be an example of demonization?
Okay, Fauci, Dr. Fauci. All right, I'm just going to
Fauci.
I'm going to be straight up. All right, there are people who want to canonize Dr. Fauci and say he should be more powerful than the president, and there are people who have conspiracy theories that he's a Satan worshiper and
the
all
whole
these
QAnon thing that's insane. Don't Google it.
And so I'm sitting going, okay, wait a minute. Here's one person, and instead of saying, well, I agree with what he said or I disagree with what he said or maybe there's been inconsistencies here or there, why do we have to suddenly create this whole Da Vinci Code conspiracy theory and
it's crazy.
On both ends? And
great movie, by the way. Wish it was true. I love I love conspiracies. I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
But you're like a moth to flame. You love conspiracies.
But if conspiracy theory was like Coachella, I would go.
Or Comic-Con.
I would dress up.
So I use that as an example, right? And so then you have, let's say, people who wholeheartedly buy into the COVID is the worst plague that's ever happened on our society. We all need to be socially distanced, quarantined, maybe sheltering at home, and far protective kind of mindset. That person sees anyone who less than that is irresponsible, criminal. And if you don't see someone with a mask, you go, oh, that person is a Republican, that person is a conservative, that person is anti-human rights, that person is not a feminist. And it's now the mask has taken on a whole ideology.
When you see someone walking down the street without a mask, you know who he's voting for.
And when you see someone with a mask, you assume you know who they're voting for.
Let's ground this a bit into maybe the last week of what, which I love this train of thought. The only reason I'm saying this is like there's been a lot that's happened in the last week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jacob Blake was shot 7 times by a police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself, I read it on the news, and then we're big NBA fans. And if you listen to this podcast, you're not a sports fan, I'm sorry. Like we talk a lot about it, but we kind of always come back to like
to life.
And we've been challenged with, what kind of podcast is this? Is it a leadership? It says it's a leadership podcast, but then someone reviewed the podcast on iTunes and said, if you're looking for 3 steps, you'll never find them.
No, we're just crawling our way forward.
and then someone said that it seems like it's a podcast on like parenting. And I was like, yeah, and then you said it's like how everyone wants to parent Aaron. But back to it, like obviously, it's heartbreaking, it's devastating, it's a violation, it should never happen. Someone getting shot 7 times by a police officer, and then even in that moment, it's so crazy how like the left and the right, in the middle, everyone, all of humanity is looking at this moment, and everyone is judging it so differently.
And that's a perfect example.
But I want to like in 2 parts. The NBA is happening, so NBA players protest,
right? Boycott,
which I thought was a beautiful act,
mm-hmm.
but it kind of worked not in their favor because the RNC is happening, and a lot of these guys spoken outwardly like against Trump, but you canceled the one thing that was competing with the RNC, which was basketball.
And they played during the week of the DNC.
So they reduced the numbers of viewership for the DNC and then increased the numbers for the RNC. And it was that night where they boycotted was the most watched RNC night ever.
Well, there was nothing else to watch that night.
Literally nothing else to watch. Even we had it on in the background, and we watch everything, so that's not really.
I watched both conventions, yeah.
But I saw a tweet or an Instagram. I don't use Twitter because Twitter's the worst. I used Instagram, and I saw this quote that said, it was a basketball player, and it said, if you don't see this as XYZ, this situation, then you're a horrible human being and all that stuff. And I was like, and that's the part of this statement.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just it's not just, hey, you need to see this. It's going, if you don't see it like this, these are all the things you are. And that second part is the part of culture that we have to destroy right now.
Right, because you could see, that's a perfect example where I tried to avoid those kind of videos. I did know what I was watching, and I saw I saw him get shot 7 times.
You see, I stopped it once I
didn't even understand what I was watching at first.
right.
And it really had an effect on me. And then immediately afterwards, people started listing all of his crimes, everything he's ever been accused of, arrested for.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously,
that he had a knife, that he had a gun in the car. There was all of this stuff
and
wrapped
that,
around
it. Domestic violence,
a rape charge, like who I don't actually even know what's true. It just started flying out immediately.
Right. And this is a perfect example of: are you trying to defend your position on the world, or are you trying to look at the world to understand it better? Because yes, he probably did have this whole list of criminal activity. I don't know. I'm not even denying that. But does that justify him being shot 7 times? Like, is that really what you're saying? Is that if a person has a criminal background, then the police can be the judge and the executioner? Are we saying that we only protect people who have a clean background and don't have a criminal record? Or are we saying, or do we need to be saying, no, even if, like, a lot of the people who have been highlighted have not had great histories. They're not people who should be canonized or turned into martyrs. And the reality, though, is that our society is measured best by the people who deserve justice least. And
you've been really wrestling with this idea.
Yeah.
We've talked about it multiple times of, like, whatever ends up being true about the situation, it's a messy situation, and he's a messy person. And I think that is something that we can, no matter who's listening right now or watching, right, we all have things that we struggle with, that there's some kind of mess or brokenness inside of us. And right, I think, would we, whether it's scalable, whether you're like, well, I'm not that guy. Well, like, yeah, but I'm sure someone could be more perfect than you are. But do you deserve justice? Do you deserve to be treated in a humane way?
Yeah, and so it's fascinating to me, like, the moment we so adamantly just stood up and said, hey, this is a moment where if you're paying attention, if you're not tone deaf, this is a moment where we all as a society need to be pushing for social justice, for racial equality, for police reform. These are things that are true regardless of your position. And at the same time, the moment you say something like, there are good cops, they go, well, then you're not on our side. The moment you say, no, there are really good men and women who are police officers who went into law enforcement to make the world better. And this is why I just detest extreme generalizations. What's ironic is that I know so many police officers who are Black, and they're good people who became police officers to make sure there was justice, to make sure that the Black community had representation, that they would be treated with fairness and value. And so then you make the sweeping statement that all cops are bad. Every cop who chose that career to make it better is now demonized with everyone else. And that's why we have to have permission to disagree. And I would say it's not only just permission to disagree with each other. I want permission to disagree with myself. See, I want permission to think one thing, learn, grow, and change my mind. I want permission to be able to have said something 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago and go, yeah, that is how I saw the world then. And I've grown and I've evolved and I've changed because either I've changed or the world has changed and I see it differently now.
Do you have an example of that? Not to put you too much in the spotlight, but there's only 2 of us and I vote you go first.
I can think of several things because I grew up as a person outside of faith and then I became a person of faith.
Yeah.
And so growing up, when kids were asked in elementary school, what you realize there are certain cultural values that are imposed on you without even realizing it. Every year, the teacher would say, we want to know your name and what your father does for a living. They never asked you what your mother did for a living. And they always assumed your mom was a housewife. Remember, this is the 60s for me. And And as we go around the room, everybody would say their name, and I would say, my name's Erwin McManus. And I said, and my mom is in the banking industry, or my mom is this. And I was the only person in the class that would ever say what my mom did, and not what my dad did. And because I never knew my dad. And then my stepdad, I wasn't sure what he did. He was involved in creative underground economies, so I couldn't really put my finger on it. And I was proud of my mom. And so I always grew up with what would be considered like kind of, I guess, a feminist ideology. It never occurred to me that there was something women couldn't do or shouldn't do. My mom was an entrepreneur. My mom was a businesswoman. My mom was educated. My mom was the person who was our hero. And so then when I became a Christian, I was taught by the culture that no, women can't be pastors, and women really should be at home, or women aren't really, crafted to be leaders, and when I became a believer in Jesus, I felt like I was being force-fed all these other belief systems, and I could feel myself struggling with it. And so for a New York minute, I'm going, oh, okay, maybe there's maybe it's not supposed to be like that. And then I went back, no, that's wrong. And so I had to actually agree to disagree with my new faith. And ironically, and there were so many things like that where I was taught in my faith, no, all these things are wrong. And at first I was almost like naively just going, okay, all these things must be wrong. But as I would read the Bible for myself, and as I, grew in maturity, I realized, no, I don't agree with myself. In fact, I remember one time my brother said to me, this is, maybe 15 years ago, on the phone, he goes, wow, you've really changed. And he meant that not in a compliment. And I took it as an insult, and then I paused and I said, you're right, I have really changed. And I have really changed. I mean, there was a time in my life I was more of an anarchist. A time in my life I was more of a socialist. There's a time in my life I would have been a liberal Democrat. There's a time in my life I became a Reagan Democrat. There was a time in my life I became more of a...
Reagan was a Republican.
Yeah, but there were Reagan Democrats that shifted over to... I couldn't say...
You couldn't say that you were a Republican at any given point.
And there was a time in life I became a Republican.
Oh, interesting.
And there was a time in life I became a libertarian.
Okay.
And you and Mariah always said I was a libertarian for me and a socialist for others. And I didn't want anyone to help me, but I wanted to help the world. And I've gone through a political journey throughout my life.
Don't leave it at socialism. Just that there's can you close that loop? Because I have like a personal disdain for socialism, because I was raised that you work hard. You work and you work hard. You don't depend on anyone else. And even moments where we had nothing, where we came from nothing and you built something, and I reaped the benefit of that. But there were moments where we lost everything together in companies, and we had to rebuild on our own. And I never went on unemployment. And I'm not knocking anyone who has to go on unemployment or go on those moments, but you always taught me that that working is important. If you are able to hold a job, hold a job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean that people who are socialists don't have a work ethic. It's just there's a different mindset.
It's a mindset and a belief system.
I think what the challenge
it is centered around building a dependency on the government.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that I don't think very many immigrants who come to the United States are socialists. And because when you come from a socialist country, you come from a country where socialism has had a significant impact, you're definitely not a fan. And so since we're talking about this, I'm just going to kind of throw this out.
Sorry, I sent us down. We don't even have to keep this. I just sent us down.
No, I think this is important because a part of the inherent conversation of socialism is class warfare, and it's the rich against the working class. And a part of the dynamic of the American culture has been, I'm working class, but I have no limit to the wealth I can gain by my hard work, my intelligence, my talent, and so I love the meritocracy of the United States. I really, really do. One of the challenges is that socialism sees institutions and corporations as evil, and so it moves toward government controlling the economics of a society. if socialists could only see that governments are a corporation.
Oh, we're at a really interesting subject.
What?
The greatest monopoly of all time is the U.S. government.
Yeah, if you could see that the government is actually a monopoly in waiting, it wants to be a monopoly, it wants to control every aspect of every industry. And I would never want to put the future of any society, any nation, in the hands of one singular monopoly. And so while I know big business is inherently corrupt, that there's an inequity that is a reality, the world doesn't get better when government has more control. But that, again, this podcast is about our opinions, and I'm giving you my opinion.
We also, but this is the whole point of this podcast is we're reserving the right to also change our opinion.
Yeah.
And if like as a listener, we consider you as much a part of this as we are, and so you obviously have a choice to listen to us or to watch us or to engage in this. And I always find it funny when people, like, I called you this week and I was like, man, we got a bad review, 3 stars, because Aaron interrupts Erwin, and I was bothered by that.
I was more bothered because you would never speak when we started Battle Ready. You only would ask me questions, and I'd have to force you to talk. And every time we were done, I would say, we're going to do this. You're going to have to speak up.
Right.
So what people don't realize is...
That was the whole point of this whole thing, was to get me to talk a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And this show is better when you talk more. And the future of the show depends on you pushing back and interrupting and speaking your mind.
With that, I say this, is that everyone has a choice to engage.
Right.
And so the same way that we reserve our right to change our opinion and to go, okay, look, like, we're going to say some things, we're going to have some conversations, we might offend some people, but I hope you don't leave because the conversation's not over.
Right.
Because me and you, like, neither one of us, I don't think so. Like, the only thing that we believe the whole world should do is believe in Jesus. But even the way that we achieve that, we're not oppressive people. We're not people who are trying to convert the world. We're trying to do, I bring that to our faith because our faith is so important to us. But I mean that with this, like, we aren't people. We're people who are part of a community. We don't believe in this idea that you have to believe in what I believe in, and if you don't, you cannot be a part of the tribe.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a lot of things, but you've taught. I think the anarchy kind of has crossed over, or maybe translated, or maybe I caught it. It's contagious, but I've always kind of been anti the establishment, anti the man. Even though I've always gotten a lot of validation for working for a corporate company or from a logo, or, for something that validates me and makes me feel a certain way. And I think we see that in so many walks of life. But I say that to go, like, we're not those people who go, if you're not, you can't sit with us if you don't believe in the same thing. We're like, hey, look, like, you can belong before you ever believe, be a part of this thing.
Yeah, and I think for us to have these conversations, I always tried to make sure that I never use language as an indictment on people. I tried to use language that they would use for themselves. And
give me an example.
I would never call Joe Biden a socialist, like a lot of people on the right do, because Joe Biden doesn't call himself a socialist. But I would call...
would you call him a secret socialist?
No, I would call Bernie Sanders a socialist because he identifies himself as... I would call AOC a socialist because she identifies herself as a socialist.
Right.
So I think it's really important, just like when you call someone a white supremacist, but they openly say, I'm not a white supremacist, I think white supremacy is evil, I think the KKK is evil.
That was something, that's another thing. Keep going, but I'll come back to it.
But if someone is a white supremacist, I feel very comfortable calling them a white supremacist because it's how they even self-identify.
Yes.
And there are people who are very comfortable calling themselves white supremacists, and I think you should call them that.
They should never feel comfortable in our presence.
In our society, yeah. But I'm just dealing from an ideological perspective. I do not think, and I know people say, no, it's not socialism, it's democratic socialism. But the only difference is in democratic socialism, you're voting to become socialist. And as opposed to having it imposed on you.
No, but right now it is being imposed on us. I have to wear a mask.
Well, what's interesting to me is that your generation is very inclined towards socialism. It seems like millennials are really attracted to socialism.
Yes. How many people have posted on Instagram, Twitter, the new, like how many stories, young people going, I love this. Like, I don't have to work. I get a check and I can hang out with my girlfriend or my wife or my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, do you not have a purpose in life? Anything inside of you going, I want to achieve something.
Yeah. So I'm going to be really,
build something.
Yeah, I'm really honest when I hear, Bernie or talk about like 75% or 90%, tax. I'm like,
not in my life.
I work way too hard to want the government to take that much of my money.
But also, like, I kind of like Bernie. Like, I like Bernie as a figure.
But I like Bernie because I think he's honest about what he believes and see,
I love.
I would give anything to get to interview him. I would love to have a conversation with him because I think he's intelligent and I think he's truthful about what he wants to do.
Bernie has no chill. Is absolutely a savage. Like, I remember when he got that surgery in his hospital bed, he tweets out, in my hospital bed, wish I had universal health care.
Oh, man, that's savage.
And I was like, dang.
But like when AOC says, I don't want their money, I want their power. Like, I think that's an important conversation going, first of all.
And then she immediately realized what she said.
And then said, we want, their power. But the reality is that in a meritocracy, without the money, there is no power. So like, Apple doesn't have power except by creating. Google doesn't have power except by creating. And I guess this is a part of my own bias. I believe that every human being is intrinsically creative. And there's this passage in the Bible that says, let those who steal stop stealing and work with their hands and do something meaningful that they may have enough to give to others. And I said, the reason we steal is because we don't believe we can create. And see, I believe every human being is intrinsically creative. And with myself, I believe I can create the future I long to live. And so I don't need governments. I don't need institutions. I don't need, as an immigrant, I feel like all I needed was the opportunity to be in this country and I could create a future. And what I think is important is for us to.
Can we just wait? Say that again. Sorry, I'm interrupting you again. But there's you. This is the issue with me and you. Is that this is like how we genuinely have conversations.
This is how we talk at home, and we're just letting everybody enter our house right now.
But like, one of your good friends, is it you? Yeah, it was Brant Kreider, who I worked for a while in New York. He's one of your good friends. He would do this thing with you. I'd never seen anybody ever do it before, where you guys would sit down. I mean, goodness, you guys would sit down and have conversations about Genesis Genesis in the Bible would blow my mind. And he would do this thing. He'd just be like, time out. Given like he is like just an incredible soul and beautiful human being and incredibly successful and influential and also just like so wise and thought-provoking and just loves to ask questions. So we're sitting at the dinner table and this is hours after dinner and you guys are having this conversation. You guys have gone on a diatribe of like, you're so down the rabbit hole talking about fringe and all this stuff. And he's just like, time out. So every time I interrupt you, I genuinely, like, if you're listening, it's like, this is me going, time out. You've spurred a thought. And now I'll forget it. And now I've forgotten the thought that I've thought of.
What are you talking about?
Oh, no, I was talking about immigration.
Right.
Whether you immigrated legally or illegally, the thing that I've found, because I know both, right? Your mom immigrated legally. We have good friends whose parents immigrated illegally. And ironically, so many immigrants that we know are Republicans, which is ironic because they all know you have like Republicans running on building this wall, and they're like, oh, we already got around, whether we got around the wall, XYZ, they're so for, like, they're against immigration, but it's how they got here. And by they, I mean my ancestors. So it is like do you find that odd?
Yes and no, because like almost every first generation immigrant I know actually would probably be more conservative.
Crazy conservative.
And a lot of that is because what they left behind, they don't want to see replicated here. And it's just like when people would come to Mosaic from other churches,
right?
And they hated the church they're at, and they would come here and try to turn Mosaic into the church they left.
Yeah.
And I would say, wait a minute. You left that church, and now you're angry because we're not things that church was. But if we became that, you would leave us too.
What is that? Is that a high need for control, or do we bring our toxicity wherever we go? And the issue wasn't that church; it was actually just them.
That's right. And so I think a part of the dilemma.
Which one? Which one's right?
No. The problem is that when a person says, "I need a new start," and you go from LA to New York, the problem is that you don't have a new start because you still have the old you.
Yeah. And
so no matter how many times you get a new start, if you keep bringing the old you, you're going to have the same result.
I have that problem all the time though, because we talk about this. Like I want to burn the bridge. I want to burn it all down, start over. Because I feel like I want to try to achieve a level of perfection in something, whether it's relationships or whether it's business or whether it's work or whether it's speaking or writing something. It's extremely hard for me to live with something broken. And so I'll either break it, end it, and try to move on and move forward. And you've really taught me like, hey, look, like how about maybe just walk when you end something. Maybe it wasn't the other person, it was just you. And you can't just start over because you're going to end up in the same spot. You have to like start from where you left off and go like, this is where I'm at and this is how I'm going to achieve something else. So many times I'm in relationships and I start over and you're in the charming part, you're in the engaging part, you like win each other over, and you end up in the same spot because you don't know how to communicate, you don't know how to fight, you don't know how to have conflict. How do we do that when we kind of live in this world where we're not allowed to disagree, we're not allowed to believe something different? I don't know.
We're not even allowed to assume the best of the other person.
Yes.
And so here, let me just be like spectrum offensive for a minute. And everyone that I talk to on the left says, if you're voting for Trump, you're a racist.
It's crazy.
They can't factor in that, well, maybe they actually have like some sincere policy issues where they're going, I'm not a fan of Trump, but I believe in these policies. I don't know. It could be, maybe they just have a different view of the economics of economics and how what economic policies help get the most people out of poverty, or maybe they're people who really think fundamentally that being pro-life is the most important issue. They're willing to sacrifice everything to protect the unborn. And then you're on the left, and the people on the right go, no, everybody on the left is a socialist. That's the new thing, right? And I'm going, no, not everyone on the left is a socialist, but socialism is having an influence on the left, just like white supremacy is having an influence on the right.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I would say that I think the issue, I wouldn't say like there's a white supremacist that has rising in power.
No, you're right, there isn't.
Because I wouldn't label Trump that only because I'm a bit more open-minded and going like whether he's struggled with racism in the past, or I don't know. Like I'm not judging his character. I'm also not like the biggest Trump fans. But also I'm able to not be a fan of someone.
No, what I'm saying is that people point to those two extremes and saying that's what that party is defined by.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say though is that maybe the issue with the right versus the left, or the right's viewpoint of the left, is that like AOC and Bernie Sanders, they were the rising voices on the left.
Yeah, they're the strongest,
I wouldn't say that there's white
voices.
Supremacists that are the rising voices on the right.
That's actually true.
Right?
Yeah, so, not that I can think of.
Right,
yeah.
Not that, and like I don't want to get into like the details, but I think that overall that was kind of the viewpoint.
Right, because I think most Americans at their core want a future that is not racist.
Yes.
Only the really dark extreme people would be different.
We've got to be there now, right? Like we've got to be there in a place where
we're going to get there, that's for sure, because I don't think we're going to take our foot off the pedal. I want to go back to this. I think the reason it's important for us to have these more open conversations, even about politics right now, is that we're not advocating one side or the other. We're saying you need to listen more carefully. There are people on the right who have sincere concerns, sincere positions, and maybe they're even swallowing hard voting for a party that carries some things they wish it didn't, but it carries some things that they feel are really important to them. And I think there are people on the left. I think there are a lot of Democrats who are not for socialism. I think there are a lot of Democrats
definitely there's
who do not want to lose the meritocracy, the American dream, the direction and progress that this nation uniquely expresses across the world.
Yes.
And but they're accepting some aspects of the Democratic Party that they don't agree with, but because they feel the whole is what they believe in. And so
I think it brings us back to that conversation of the parallel of there's good cops and there's bad cops. There's good people and there's bad people, and there's good people who have bad moments. And there's good cops who have bad moments.
Yes, and there are protesters and there are writers, and they're not the same thing.
Yes.
And so one party wants to focus on the protesters and pretend there are no writers and no looters. And the other side wants to pretend there are only looters and writers and there are no protesters. I think, Aaron, one of the things that I think both of us have experienced is even during the last year, during the quarantine, like we could feel ourselves adjusting as we get new information. We could feel ourselves having conversations, and sometimes you would be on one side, I would be on the other side, and then we'd change each other's minds. And one of the things I really love about our conversations is that for us, it's a daily battle. Like we're trying to understand life. We're trying to understand the situations around us, trying to understand how to do the most good. We're trying to wade through all the garbage of everything negative that's being said about each side. And the idea that the Republicans are all racist is an absurd caricature. And so then if I like someone's post on the right, does that now make me no longer acceptable to you?
Right.
Or if right now I'm going to have people on the right going, wait a minute, you gave advice for the Biden campaign, and so then suddenly I'm going to be unacceptable to everyone on the right.
Yeah.
And my question is, do I have permission to disagree? See, and I like this podcast to generate the conversation. Like, do we have permission to disagree? Or does when anyone disagrees, are they now vilified? When everyone disagrees, are they now the enemy?
It's like watching the end of a Muhammad Ali fight. I think it's like open your mind up, start asking some questions, question everything.
Yeah.
Because if the things that are true, they will last. They will hold up. They will hold steady. The things that fall quickly will fall quickly the moment you start asking the questions of the foundation in which they're built on. And that is a huge point, because I think that's something you've always taught me is like, look, you're never going to know how. You I think early 20s, you sat me down and said, it's one thing to believe in something, but you have to construct a worldview of why you believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
And I remember really struggling with this for maybe half a decade, maybe an entire decade, that was something in the back of my mind going, okay, look, if I'm going to get smarter, if I'm going to like generate ideas, if I'm going to speak, where am I speaking from? Where's the place that I'm coming from? Mm-hmm. A lot of this is you've taught me to challenge thinking. Don't be an instigator, be actually someone yearning to learn.
Absolutely.
Right? I think that's the difference. It's a subtle adjustment of going like, it's the difference of protesting and looting. Mm-hmm. Right? It's voicing an opinion and expressing an act and oppressing like violence on something.
Yeah, and a perfectly practical example of this is that couple that I know that went to the RNC at the White House.
Yeah, amazing people.
Beautiful people. They left the event and were attacked by people who were protesting the Trump rally, the Republican rally, and he almost had to physically engage with someone who was going after his wife.
That would have been a very bad moment. He is a very big man.
He is the biggest man I know.
So strong.
He would have destroyed.
Break me.
Yeah, and he said, I was saved from having to attack the people attacking my wife and I, because police intervened in that moment.
Right.
And I know other people who were attacked and hurt. So now you can't even choose a side without being in danger of being attacked by the other side. And I'm saying, wait a minute, I thought liberalism was supposed to elevate us as human beings so we think at a higher level and live at a more humane state of existence. And it seems to me that we are now moving further and further down and becoming the worst version of ourselves. I think a conversation about permission to disagree is really important.
Yeah.
And even as we're talking, I was getting a little nervous because I'm going, oh no, I'm saying this, and now people on the right are going to be really offended, and then I'm saying this, and people on the left are going to be really offended. And this is a part of the problem. I feel like we're on this tightrope, and I'm not good at right and left thinking.
No.
I'm good at more like organic, holistic thinking, and paying attention to every side, and taking the intelligence of each side, bring it together.
It's so funny because historically you've been controversial, but you would hate that one side dislikes you.
It's so true.
But both sides dislike you because you sit in the middle. So the moment you make a statement, one side dislikes you, and the moment you make another statement, the other side dislikes you. You live in constant turmoil, having to plead.
See, I don't feel like I sit in the middle. I feel like I sit in a different dimension. I'm trying to pull everybody forward to help them realize there's a better way of thinking. And I mean, look, just on a fun level, like permission to disagree. I used to think football was football and football was football. Like I remember when I came to the States, I was trained to like American football and to hate global soccer, football. When my nephew came from El Salvador, he had a soccer ball, and me and my brother punctured his soccer ball and handed him a football and said, "This is not a football. This is a football."
That's so mean.
David, I'm so sorry for listening.
Oh,
man, that was a horrible thing to do as your older cousin, because we had been so brainwashed that there was one football.
And it's so funny now because we go to like London, and I'll sit with some of the young guys out there, McLaren and Dan, and they'll be like, "So do you like soccer?" And they'll make fun of me in the moment. I'm like, okay, no, I actually like football.
That's right.
But
now
when you say football here, you're like, what?
I know, and now I love LAFC. I mean, I've been to the World Cup. I love football, and so I look and go, oh, permission to disagree. I changed my mind multiple times, and I feel so bad about when I was wrong.
Yeah.
And but I was I held that position so extremely.
Yeah.
You know, for a long time, I wouldn't become an American citizen because I didn't want to be a part of a country that I could not be president of, since I wasn't born here. and so I was adamant. My whole family became American citizens. Our foster daughter, Patty, who came here undocumented, we helped her go through the whole process of documentation, getting her green card. She became an American citizen.
Under the Bush administration.
Under the Bush administration, right?
He gave a huge leniency to help people.
And so she became an American citizen before me. And it took me a long time. It was 9/11 that actually changed my heart. I decided to become an American citizen. Yeah. Permission to disagree. And I did not want to become an American citizen. Now I'm so proud to be an American citizen.
And we're just talking about things that like we believed when we were younger or earlier in life, and now we're changing our mind, and maybe our thought process evolved, or maybe we've just changed our opinion. When I was younger, I really loved Warped Tour bands.
Well, you're like a music maven. What's Warped Tour bands? What does that mean?
It was the worst kind of music. It was like the whole hardcore, like emo, like punk rock. Like I still like back punk rock, but like and then to think now, like the fact that I wasn't into like the Stones and like the Beatles, and like I remember it was interesting because I actually was, before I was into Warped Tour and the emo thing, I was into like Nirvana. I did get into the Beatles. I did get into like the Stones. I did get into like Jurassic 5 and all of these like incredible movements, because the first time you got an iPad or you got an iPod, your friend Melvin put all of his music on. He put all of it. So like it was everything from like jazz, like funk, to stuff you never even listened to, but just as like a gift to be like, hey, here's all my music. Because back then it was like you had to spend countless hours uploading all of your CDs to a computer, to an iPod. It's different now where everything's just Spotify and iTunes. But I love music. But if I look back on like some of those Warped Tour, like Taking Back Sunday bands, I'll listen to it every once in a while to like look back and just kind of laugh and like listen, and Taking Back was kind of a cool, but I remember I loved going to those shows and like moshing, and I was such a sweet kid, so I don't know, I was like getting thrown around, but I loved that whole like subculture. I was like one of the first kids to wear skinny jeans in my like high school.
Okay, I remember this because you see,
I had to buy girls' jeans. Right,
we went to the jean store, and all that existed in LA was baggy jeans, because it was very much kind of like a
Chicano,
like hood kind of. And you wore the drop jeans, and you showed your chonies and everything like that.
Chonies, no one says that. You just like, who says that?
Your boxers.
Yeah.
And
no one wears boxers either.
And you were like, I want to wear skinny jeans. I'm like, I'm not going to let you wear skinny jeans.
Because the only option was girls' jeans.
Right. And I'm like, I'm not going to let you wear girl jeans.
Yeah.
And then he said, hey, this is the other option. And I saw all the drop crotch, kind of like jeans.
It wasn't drop crotch. Drop crotch is
later.
Drop crotch is later. You saw all of
just super baggy.
Yeah, I was like
baggy.
I was also like a skinny kid in high school, and I'm like, look, like I go to like, I shopped at Old Navy back then. I was like, go to Old Navy or wherever. I have no option. It's like 10 times too big on me. And
well, you
like
changed my
huge.
mind.
I did.
I bought you the girls' skinny jeans, and you
Yeah.
played the bass guitar in your band with skinny jeans. but it's see, to me, it's like permission, to disagree.
Permission to disagree. Yeah.
And I disagree with myself. And I changed my mind. You had music, and you're very opinionated. So when you loved Warped Tour, it was the best.
It was the best.
And now you look back and go, wow, how did I love that? So
bad.
What do you love right now that you think you're going to change your mind on?
Oh man, what do I love right now? I think I'll change my mind on social media. Yeah, I'll probably move to like some mountain or some beach. And never have a phone every like once a day kind of thing. I'm so engaged on it now, but I think that will die. I think it will turn into like social media is everywhere and always and all encompassing, and then I think there would be like a huge reaction of like, okay, there's be purists who go like, oh, this is my whole life. Like so much of what we do is on social media. I'm active on it. We do all these things. I wanted to do a podcast called STDs, socially transmitted diseases from social media. Well, maybe that's our next topic. I think social media. I think maybe living in cities might change. You know, I love cities, but I think that might change.
Yeah,
decentralization of people.
Yeah, and there's so many. I think even like belief systems that people hold, and that you become so dogmatic, and you have to give yourself permission to disagree, because otherwise you can't keep growing, you can't keep changing, you can't keep adjusting as you go along.
Yeah.
In life. I mean, to me, I look at things that limited me, like. I said in my mind that I hated Europe. So I only traveled to Asia, I traveled to India, I traveled to China and Japan and Cambodia. And
you only went east for a long time.
For a long time. And I also told myself I'd never go back to anything Latin. So I never went to Latin America.
No, I grew up with no heritage.
And then I also told myself I would never like Paris because it was so cliche. And then I end up in Europe.
It's not cliche. It's just right.
I know. I go to Europe and I fall in love with Europe. And I'm so mad at myself for hating it and loving it.
I know.
And I go to Paris and it becomes my favorite city in the world. And all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed. And I thought, no, I'm a cliche. And then I finally go to Latin America. Maybe only just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
No, maybe 10.
No. Oh, well, like.
Not other than El
really
Salvador.
Going to Latin America.
Yeah, I would go to El Salvador to see my family.
5 years ago, yeah.
And I went to speak finally, and next thing I knew, all of Latin America opened up, and it was so endearing to me. And I had to recapture my language, and I had to recapture my culture, and it became so important to me. And I think what's so interesting is, one, my limited perspective limited my life experience, and so it's taught me over time to not be closed to anything.
Yeah.
And you can even see this in sports when people hate like LeBron or they hate Jordan or they hate Kobe.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I say, hey, try to never hate greatness, because one day you're going to realize you should have appreciated that greatness while it was there.
Yeah.
And the same way with like conflicting views. Like,
well, I think I'm never going to drive. I think driving gas powered cars will be like detestable to us in 10 years. The fact that we would do that to our Earth. And that sounds very
you know
hippie
me,
now.
I know, and I only really drive an electric car.
And if I could afford one, I would drive an electric car.
Yeah, sorry about that. You're on minimum wage. We need some sponsors for that already.
Right. What's it? You had a mullet?
All right, we don't have to talk about that. We don't
but
have to
actually,
I didn't even know what mullets were. I didn't know they existed.
How did you not know they existed? You had one.
Yeah, but not because I'd ever seen one.
So how did that happen? But it's funny because like those glasses that everyone's into, like the big wireframe, you had those before it was cool at all.
You have to realize I was always extremely eccentric.
Yes.
And so when I had something or something, no one else had it.
Right.
Like, so there was nobody else in my world who had the haircut I had. And everyone that I work with thought it was more an homage to my Navajo roots. It's because they were unaware of mullets themselves. Yeah. So they assumed it was me being almost like more like primal tribal Native American, because I look very Native American.
You do. And if anyone like if someone didn't know where El Salvador was, you'd think it's next to Norway because you're quite tall.
Yes.
And you meet most people from El Salvador, and they're like
Much smaller.
5'2".
Yeah.
And and they're the best. It's the incredible culture, most beautiful country in the world, I think.
And so what happened for me was I had super, super long hair. I was kind of always a hippie, and from my generation, the 60s.
And then you started wearing suits.
And then I went into this business environment, and I just couldn't cut my hair off, so I just shaved the sides of it. And little did I know, it was what later would become known as a mullet.
Yeah.
So when the first time someone ever said to me, "You had a mullet," I go, "I never had a mullet." I was completely unaware that I had a mullet, and I'm very eccentric. I'm always changing the way I look. I'm always changing my hair, my clothes. I give myself permission to disagree with whatever style I like in that moment, and changing that. But I'm the one that asked to have this conversation because I felt like one of the things that we have that's rare is that we can share our opinions without losing respect for each other. And I think about, like, over the years, just conversations I've had with you and watching you like process things from one position to another position.
Mm-hmm.
And you always have a lot of conviction.
Mm-hmm. I swing from like there's no gray with me. It's always black and white, and I swing from black and white.
And it's researched. Like you do not like superficial thought.
No.
So you take a lot of time. You dig deep. You fight, and then you have a conviction. And sometimes I tease you because even like in the fashion world, to go, well, yeah, but you used to hold this. I go, yeah, I've changed.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually one of the most powerful things about you. And I think it's one of the things I really want to commend for everyone in a generation. Is like every ideology that is trying to make the world better should be treated with respect. You should try to understand what the problem is that they're trying to solve, how they are identifying that problem, and how they're identifying the solution to that problem. And every solution leaves some things unsolved. And they have to weigh the pros and cons of that. And like you look at the issues of like pro-life, pro-choice. I would be a person on a personal level who wish there was no abortions in the world. And but I've been attacked a lot for not being pro-life enough. And it's not that I'm personally so pro-life, but I also understand why it was necessary to have a conversation about pro-choice and how we need to stop women from having to have abortions in back streets and without doctors.
And a whole it was a really horrific like underground thing where there were like sketchy surgeries and women were dying, and it was. And
I felt one of the most lacking of compassionate things that ever happened with the right was an unwillingness to acquiesce to statements like the endangerment of the mother or because of rape or incest, and this adamant dogmatic no, never, without any level of empathy or compassion, I feel like was a part of what created our present situation. But then I saw this woman with a t-shirt that said 20 abortions and counting, and she was bragging about having 20 plus abortions. And I thought, there's a difference between being pro-life, being pro-choice, and being pro-abortion.
Just destructive.
And I think a part of the dilemma in our culture is that once we have a right, we shouldn't assume that right means that we now have the right to be abusive to even the human spirit. And it's just like the right to defend yourself. There are places where you can shoot someone who comes into your house you have a right to have a gun, a permitted gun, and you have a right to shoot someone. That doesn't mean you should. And it doesn't mean that that should be your posture in life. I think about all the people who are in prison right now on charges of selling or possessing weed.
It's crazy.
And now it's legal and people are selling it and becoming millionaires on it while there's still people in prison for having a small amount of it.
Yeah.
And I look at our society and I go, hey, we have to have room to go, hey, we made the best decisions we could back then, but we were wrong.
Yes.
or that's just wasn't the best decision.
And then
we can go
on to
correct
that
those
too,
things.
because keep going. Sorry, I'm really just reiterating what you said. Keep going.
I just think politicians don't have the capacity to say I was wrong
Or to apologize,
or to apologize. It seems impossible for a politician to apologize.
because then it's used against them as a weakness that will be continually exploited for XYZ. And
And I mean, I've never been a pro-weed person in terms of I just think it makes a person lethargic.
yeah,
I've always been a person who felt it should not be illegal.
well, it's just ironic.
And it doesn't match what people think of a pastor.
No, right. And we talk a lot. We talk about all of these things, and you're like, how are cigarettes legal?
How's alcohol legal and
How is
weed not legal?
And how is weed not legal? And I don't care. But I do think there's a lot of people in prison who shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because they sold something that, what's the difference between that and selling cigarettes that we know are directly connected to cancer? Like, we know this thing is so directly connected to cancer and destroying people's lives but yet we still don't make it illegal. We've restricted their advertising space, restricted their sponsorship space. We've shamed it, and yet there's still so much of it out there.
And that's the power of big business.
Yes.
And you have
lobbyists
to look at
and the politics.
And you have to look at the corruption that's there. And prohibition didn't work. And the prohibition created the space for underground crime.
Yeah.
Prohibition made a lot of people rich.
Yeah.
And eventually our government realized you can't try to control morality in this way. But then it's the scary thing, right? How far will it go? The other direction, right? It's like, we have to want the betterment of our culture. I think the moment we figured out cigarettes were bad, we should have gotten rid of them from our society. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm more angry that cigarettes have been legal than that weed is legal.
Yeah.
And I'm going, we've devastated our healthcare system because of cancer. And, we know that drunk driving has been one of the most significant killers of people in America. But because they have big industry behind them, we couldn't really create laws that protect people, make the world better.
And I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm anti the reckless endangerment of other human life.
Mm-hmm.
And you can argue that in so many different angles. But I do think to just kind of go to the end of kind of as we wind down here, we have to figure out how to disagree, to figure out how to be able to have these conversations out loud. Mm-hmm. Also be able to apologize and understand when we're wrong, and to understand that we can change our opinion and it doesn't make us a lesser person. Mm-hmm. And we can concede, right? Like, I think you've taught me it's not just how you win, it's how you fail. It's how you lose. Do you lose in a posture where you can learn, or do you fail in the posture where you're going to succeed again? Mm-hmm. Because this whole, we've created a culture, we've talked about this multiple times, but we create a culture that demonizes failure. Mm-hmm. That the moment you fail, you're canceled.
Yeah.
And we find out that you failed 10 years ago, we're going to cancel you as well. What it's going to create is a society that never learns, that only hides and pushes things that are deep and that are simple and small to deep darkness weaknesses, mm-hmm. deep dark weaknesses that we struggle with and behind closed doors that we're not able to come to light. And I think that's going to be more destructive for our society 100 years from now, 10, 20 years from now than it is right now. But to leave us on some hope, can you leave us on some inspiration, to leave us on some hope, and then we'll wrap this thing up?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that was striking me is that human history is always imperfect. And frankly, if we're going to be really honest, we should be all apologizing to each other for all the things that have happened in the past.
Right.
But you can either have an apocalyptic view of the future that everything's just going to get worse and worse and worse, or you can. But I'm sort of like anti-apocalyptic. I believe we can make the world better and better and better, and we make the world better by living a life of love, by living a life filled with hope, by living a life that is courageous and full of faith, by living a life of compassion. And so here's what I'd like to leave you with: assume the best. Not just of people who agree with you, but even of people who disagree with you. And sometimes when you assume the best, you're going to be wrong. But it won't hurt you. You'll be okay. But when you assume the best of people, you have a better chance of getting the best of people. And so I'm going to assume the best of you. This is our battle ready and commitment. If you're on the far right, even when we disagree with you, we're going to assume the best of you. When you're on the far left, we may disagree with you, but we're going to assume the best of you. Wherever you are in the spectrum of policies or politics or culture or belief systems, we're going to work from the posture that we're going to work hard to assume the best of you. And if we could all assume the best of each other, we would just make each other our best.
Mm.
And so, Aaron, I'm going to always assume the best of you, even when I know you're wrong.
I usually call later. I messed up. Please forgive me.
No, and I hope you assume the best of me, even if my thinking is too short-sighted and hasn't adjusted to the realities of a new world.
Sometimes you're just too open, and I'm like, can we pick a side sometimes? But it's okay.
Yes, I'll pick a side as long as I have permission to disagree with myself later.
Yeah.
And choose the other side.
I think there's a way we can pick sides, but also pick all of the people.
Yeah, I may pick a side, but I'm always going to choose people over the side.
True. That's so good.
Hey, it's good talking to you.
It's good talking to you. And let the Clippers win in this next round.
That's true. Oh, there it is. All of you who think the Lakers are going to win it all, permission to disagree.
Yes. Okay. So as we close, I just want to thank every single person who watches and listens. And if you can, go right now and rate and review this wherever you're watching or listening on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Every Friday, a new episode of Battle Ready.
And we have some Battle Ready merch.
We do. We have this hat. It says Battle Ready. And we'll find a place where you can buy it. And if you comment on some of the Instagram photos at Battle Ready Podcast, we give away some of these for free each week.
That's awesome.
Buy these on the web. I don't know. Just kind of like a cool way to get engaged and stay connected.
All right.
Okay.
Have a great week. See you next Friday.
See you next Friday.
All right.